For those of you who have already joined, we're going to wait a couple minutes, let people check in, and then we will start the presentation. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. This has been a great deal of attention recently around different credential approaches in the market. Today, we'll talk about the public key open credential, otherwise known as PKOC. We're confident that PKOC delivers one of the strongest user experiences, and more important, this is not new. PKOC-enabled solutions were in proof of concept 4 years ago and are now commercially deployed with real interoperability demonstrated across the ecosystem. Today, we're going to focus on something the physical access industry has been working towards for years: interoperability at scale. Across the market, organizations are adopting mobile credentials, smart cards, and cloud-based identity systems, but many of these deployments still operate within closed ecosystems, limiting flexibility and creating long-term dependency. This was the genesis of PKOC. PKOC is an open standard that enables secure public key-based credentials to operate across multiple vendors and platforms. At its core, PKOC is about freedom of choice for organizations, integrators, and manufacturers. The conversation has now shifted. This is no longer about proof of concept. It's about production deployment at scale. In today's session, you'll see multiple credential types working within a single architecture, interoperable issuance and validation across systems, and mass enrollment, how credentials are provisioned efficiently across large populations. What we're showing today is not just a demonstration. It's a practical model for deploying open, interoperable access control systems in real environments. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Jason Roulette, who will walk us through the demonstration. Jason?
Yep, thank you, David. So first off, welcome. I certainly want to extend a personal thank you to all of you for taking the time to attend this webinar today and for us to be able to share some of the latest and greatest related to the Physical Security Interoperability Alliance, and in particular, public key open credential. As Dave has shared a little bit about the history and how PKOC has come about, it really has been a story of, over the past 4 years, us going from proof of concept to full-on commercialization, showing interoperability of readers with both physical and mobile credentials over Bluetooth and NFC. And when we talk about public key open credential, we talk about bringing security built in, asymmetric encryption that provides fast transaction time. So you're talking about being able to do this in 200 milliseconds or less, which is certainly, I think, a significant advantage and something important from a user experience perspective. And as well, public key open credential addresses long-standing challenges for our industry around the risks of cloning and ensuring that the credential being presented is in fact the genuine credential. So these are all things that public key open credential helps to address. And then we've started talking over the last year about the need for how do we take this public key and enroll it into those places like physical access control, but even can be in a wider set of industry use cases. how do we get it enrolled for it to be used, right? Now that we have this public key that's self-issued. And for a while, we've had the ability to demonstrate in commercial offerings through EMSI, through RFIDs, and from Elitech, where you could use a USB style reader and a badging station to be able to have a valid PKOC reader that could input the PKOC credential to whatever you wanted to consume it with. And now we're evolving this further to an enrollment service that is initiated through just an email invite. And so we're going to be able to demonstrate that today. It's a build on from our event at ISC West a few weeks back with a deeper dive and what will be I think a clear picture of how this works. But that's introduced through Century Interactive and their DoorDeck team today. So very much looking forward to being able to share that with you. So with that, we're going to sort of start back to the topic of interoperability. And I'd like to introduce Rodney Thayer of Smithy Solutions, who's going to share more about that. Rodney?
Thank you, Jason. So the PKOC initiative, we've got stable specifications today for both credentials in card format and mobile. So there's a spec for how an NFC card interacts with the reader. It's a public spec. It's been implemented by multiple vendors, and there are products in the market today. Same thing with Bluetooth-based credentials on mobile phones. The PKOC initiative has set this up so it's completely open, so there are multiple applications that can use the PKOC credential format inside a mobile phone. It's not locked into one phone. It's not locked into a wallet. The technology is based on public key cryptography, and so it leverages the ability of these devices to operate with elliptic curve key pairs. So it's stronger cryptography than the legacy shared key stuff that we've been using in the past. And now that the PKOC environment, we've got cards ourselves. That there was a specification for a card applet. So there are such a thing as PKOC cards, but there are other kinds of devices that are doing public key cryptography now, like Duox cards. And so we're looking at expanding the spec to cover those sorts of things. All of these are public specifications. There are reference implementations on GitHub. The specs are on the PSIA website, freely available to anybody. So they're truly, truly open. And so now that we have these various building blocks, we've got the stage set to be able to look at doing actual practical deployments of this. And, we've been doing proof of concept so far and small scale things. Using USB readers, things like you would use in a badging office. And now we're trying to look at how you would do this at more of an enterprise scale. And this, interacts with how the vendors provide APIs and how do we have to provide third-party software interfaces. So that's some of the things we're using here today. And here to talk about some more of the manufacturer view, this is Rick Foke.
Yeah. Thanks, Rodney. And for those of you that don't know, Rodney is our esteemed technical advisor and compatibility tester. He's the one that keeps us honest. When we do say that this card worked with this reader and that reader too, Rodney's the man. So thanks, Rodney, for all the help you've done with the PSIA testing here. But yeah, from a manufacturer's point of view, we need to have scale. I mean, those USB readers are great for enrollments for, organizations of maybe 10 to 100 people. After that, forget it. You have to have a nice enrollment platform, through email for those mobile credentials that most of our customers are gravitating towards. The market studies do show that mobile is up to about maybe 28 to 30% of the market for credentials now, as far as number of credentials sold per year. In the access control world. That's global too, by the way, not just North America. So that's why it's so important to have a nice, scalable, global enrollment platform, that supports PKOC credentials. And we're, first to market here with a nice integration through our web services connection to our CQ9000 access control platform that will allow the platform to add, delete, change credentials on the fly, based on, other inputs from Active Directory, from, Microsoft, Enter ID, those types of, platforms to be the authoritative source of truth. So very excited to have this demo for you. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Marlon, who is going to actually give you the demo.
Hi, thank you, Rick. Hi, I'm Marlon from Sentry. So with our enrollment with our product, it's designed for mass enrollments, designed for, like Rick said, having the hundreds and thousands of users where having a USB just is not an applicable solution. How we do it is, imagine you join a company, they add you to their secure system, however that can occur. You then receive an email or a link or some kind of thing. You can then trigger that on your mobile. It would then share that credential back with the secure system. And I'm going to try and give you guys a demo of that now. And I say try just so that I don't annoy the demo gods, but should work. It's always worked, but nevertheless. So what we're going to do here is, imagine this is my phone here, which it is. We've clicked on a link or an invite that we've received. It then opens the app that is taking care of your PKOC credential. It's asking you to permission to share your public key. And sorry, one moment, I forgot a step. So let's go back here. Let's add this user. That is the bit that I forgot. So we're adding this into Secure. This is the new Secure IQ, but it also works with the full Secure system. So I'm adding myself into Secure here, and I'm not doing anything special. All I'm adding here is my email address, and our product then captures that information and triggers other workflows. So you can see me here appear. What happens then is that we can imagine I've received an email or some sort of communication asking me to click on a link. Once I do that, it
Marlon,
then opens the app.
before you do that, can you show people that the credentials do not exist in Secure?
Oh, sorry, yes. So we've just added it. There is no credentials. It's all empty. Sorry, I was a poor magician there. I should have said.
No worries, thanks. I just want to make sure people don't see this as a smoke and mirrors exercise. It's the real deal.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So it's asking me to share my public key with the organization, and it gives you some information. It then asks you what email address you want to use. In this case, I've already signed up with these email addresses. If I was to add another one or it doesn't exist, I would get a 2FA to my email to make sure I am the owner. Once I press approve, the credential is created, but it's then shared. So in here, theoretically, it should be here already. It's that fast, but it can take a few seconds. And there it is. We now have the credentials have appeared as if by magic. And if we click on one of them, we select the item. Oh, is it that what I wanted to do? Edit.
I think it's a right click and edit, right?
Yeah. We can see the extended fields and we can see the full fat public key appear here. And the reason why I've got 3 credentials is because I've signed up with 3 phones. So it's as easy as that. You can sign up with as many phones, as many devices. And this product has been also designed to support cards as well. So we are working on the ability for you to tap the card on the back of the mobile to enroll it as well. But it's essentially designed to work with multiple cards, multiple phones, and multiple systems. And I think with that, I will pass you on to Bruno. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marnois. I'm Bruno. I'm working with Tech Systems, And so we are one of the integrator as part of the PSIA PKOC team. And we may ask ourselves, why is it important for integrators to be participating in that endeavor? It's a little bit like Rick mentioned earlier. Mobile adoption is fast becoming a standard. So we have many of our clients, like any other integrators, who are embarking on that journey where new technology will need to be selected. And there's so much buzzword around mobile credential, cloud wallet, wearables, all that, where our clients are expecting the integrator to be able to understand the type of mixed environment, understand the constraint, how can we help them with the upgrade migration path. And they are looking for some trusted guidance. They are expecting the integrator to be neutral, to future-proof their next investment. And therefore, they don't want us just to resell whatever we've been selling them for the last 10 or 15 years. So therefore, a participation in PKOC helped us as an integrator to truly advise with confidence our client, not relying on assumptions or past experience. So we are able to really provide them a solution that's truly interoperable for the future of their organization. So this is why we think that having consultants, having other integrators helps the organization ensure that we are fully interoperable. We're going to be there for a long run, and we are providing the proper migration path to our client. So that's the perspective of an integrator. And with this, I will pass the mic to John from EMSI.
Hi, and this is John Tepley with EMSI. I wanted to share our experience with the PSIA PKOC experience. Nearly 3 years ago, we came across a PSIA LinkedIn post that illustrated a PKOC interoperability matrix of mobile apps and readers and cards. Having worked in the RFID industry for some time, we recognized most of these companies. We thought it was interesting and different, but didn't think much more than that. Sometime later, we were presenting our EMSI product roadmap to a customer, which included our plans to introduce BLE mobile credentials into the security market. Our customer suggested that EMSI should consider joining PSIA to become familiar with open credentials. The customer's suggestion was enough for EMSI to join PSIA and become an active member of the PKOC working group. At that time, EMSI's experience was focused on BLE, which presented an immediate opportunity to contribute to the development and review of the PKOC BLE specification. One of the main benefits of participating in the working group has been the interaction among the members from different companies. Collaboration with competitors, partners, vendors, and all working together to a shared objective of advancing PKOC credentials has strengthened the entire group. Fast forward to today, EMSI is now part of the interoperability matrix with mobile apps, BLE modules, RFID readers, physical badges, and even mass enrollment process. The PKOC working group has done much of the heavy lifting, and for participating members, it has been both a learning and rewarding experience. Companies in the security industry interested in open credentials do not need to join PSIA to access PKOC specifications and documentation. They are free. However, joining PSIA and actively participating in the working group provides a deeper understanding of PKOC credentials and insight in how the industry is evolving towards open credentials while still maintaining decades-long ties to legacy systems. Today, and even more so in the future, interoperability has become a key requirement in customer bid specifications. The momentum behind PKOC is only growing, and EMSI is excited to be part of shaping what interoperability looks like for the future of our industry. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jason.
Excellent. Thanks, John. Really appreciate that. So, today we've had a chance to hear a little bit about the foundation of the Physical Security Interoperability Alliance and the birth of what we now call Public Key Open Credential. We've had a chance to hear a bit of the details behind what interoperability means with PKOC, as Rodney was sharing, and how we continue to expand upon that. Rick was able to talk about the value from a PACS manufacturer perspective and the importance of enrollment and scale, right? Not just at the small size. And then we got to see the latest and greatest demo from Marwin on what an invite and how that can be automatically pushed into a PACS to begin the deployment of something called public key open credential, which was fantastic. Transitioning over to Bruno, who shared the integrator's perspective, right? How this is important. It becomes a time savings, being able to embrace open standards, and the role that they play in the public key open credential arena. And then certainly really enjoyed hearing the personal story of EMSI's journey, how quickly they've been able to adapt to PKOC and what it meant to them as a startup company and being able to get into interoperable ecosystem. So all things I hope that you were able to benefit and take away from today. So personal thank you on behalf of all of the Physical Security Interoperability Alliance for you taking the time and choosing to participate in this webinar today and learn more about what we're doing. So with that, I'd like to now open up for more of a Q&A. So feel free to use the question and answer or chat to post questions, and any of the panel members. So ask the panel members to jump back on video and unmute your mics, and we will be glad to help address questions that you might have. So feel free, and any of the mechanisms available, again, chat or Q&A to post questions.
And don't be shy.
Yes, don't be shy. That's what we're here to help with. Exactly. And we like the tough questions, so don't be shy. Thanks, Rick.
One of the first questions is knowing some of the comments earlier were about the speed of the PKOC credential technology. Can you share any more information on how that was derived and what your experience has been?
Yeah, so I can take that one, David. So at the end of the day, the bit deeper of behind the scenes of how PKOC works, it does a send of the public key, as you saw Marwin demonstrate from the invite, right? He gave approval, the public key gets sent. Every time you do that, the reader side is going to produce what's called a challenge response. And it basically generates a random block of data, sends it back to the credential, and asks the credential to sign that with its private key. That random signed block of data goes back to the reader, and the reader then validates the what maybe would be thought of like a fingerprint, right? Validates that signature against the signature of the public key that was sent. And if they're not signed by the same exact private key, then you know that's potentially a clone. And so that is the verification that the credential or the public key is from the authentic source that it was generated from. And that is the check that PKOC does. And that can add happen. To that. Yes, give me 1 sec. So that can happen in 200 milliseconds or less, right? So that's not a heavy burden part. It's not a certificate validation. And Rodney, please jump in here.
So we've measured this when we hook up readers using OSDP. One of the things that the test environment does is it observes what the response time is when you present a card and watching the messages going back and forth between the reader and the panel. And there is, in fact, a 200 millisecond limit that you would have issues in OSDP if it was longer than that. So we watch these numbers. And with the PKOC, with the NFC cards we get now, it's a small number of message exchanges. So it works out to 30 to 100 milliseconds. Usually that's some kind of a time like that. Certainly under 200 milliseconds. That's sort of, it can't actually perform properly OSDP if it locked up for longer than that. So we actually, we are measuring this and we're finding that it's completely adequate.
Yeah, and additionally, from a metrics perspective, we've also used apps and cards, with built-in diagnostics to measure the time and tracked it that way as well, in addition to the OSDP test tool. So those numbers are verified; they're not just estimates.
Another question, what's the different similarities of PKOC versus FIDO? Do they complement each other?
So FIDO is more on the logical side, where PKOC has been focused more on the physical. They can coexist actually quite well. So you could have a single credential that is FIDO and PKOC. They're both really based more in the asymmetric side of the world, but they do different things, and they are both standards for the industry to be considered. And but I would say it's the coexistence of them. And I'm not sure if anybody else wants to jump in there, but that would be.
I don't have the FIDO protocol sort of in my head right now. I believe the nature of the message exchanges and stuff inside the technology doesn't quite fit the access control kind of a model, but they're both using, if you're using FIDO2, it's the enterprise class stuff. They're both leveraging public key cryptography and I believe also certificates in some cases. So it's similar tech. And when you use modern kind of smart cards or mobile devices, it's completely reasonable to have these two technologies coexist. So that tends to be what happens.
Yeah, and we have done both FIDO2 and PKOC on the same credential with a multi-tech reader that could read both. So I can tell you the coexistence of them is absolutely possible.
Another question, could you please provide details on how public-private keys are provisioned to the cards in a large-scale environment greater than 50,000 users? Also, can existing CA be integrated?
Yep, great question. So first off, the issuance or the creation of the keys is a function of PKI, right? So as soon as you install an applet on a smart card, like a Java card or a DuOx card, or you install a mobile app, or at some point in the future, if we're supporting wallet, if you put the credential in a wallet. So at any of those stages where the credential gets created, it will issue the public and private key pair, right? That's part of the creation process. And so the public key now exists. The derivative of the public key that we use is the X portion of the key, which is 256 bits. That's all those numbers that you saw Marwin illustrating in the secure after he successfully enrolled his credential. So the minimum to meet compliance with PKOC is using the last 8 bytes of that X portion of the key, which is 64 bits, and that's enough to give you the randomization and to avoid duplicate credentials and not need issue codes, site codes, facility codes, all of that aspect, right? And then on up to the maximum, which is 256 bits. Now, so the provisioning is self-provisioned, right? That nothing, Marwin's demonstration didn't start off to create the key unless the app hadn't existed yet, and then the first step is the creation of the app. At that point, the key exists, and after that, it's just getting the permission to send that public key to whatever system is going to enroll it, and then it is extracting that X portion and using that as the representation of the credential. So now if you're in an environment that is over 50,000 users or a large scale, what Marwin demonstrated today, I can simultaneously send that invite to all 50,000 of them, and then they go through that enrollment process, and at whatever pace they choose to accept the invite and action doing the app. So I mean, certainly from a scale perspective, and that's one of the comments that Rick was sharing from a PAX perspective. Once you start getting into mid, large, and enterprise, right, this is the type of capabilities you're going to want to be able to scale enrollments and not have a single bottleneck.
PKOC uses a key pair in the credential. There is no third-party signing operation, so there is no certificate authority. And since the keys are generated essentially at the time the application or the card gets generated, there's no you don't have to have any kind of an issuance ceremony. So, you buy 1,000 cards or 50,000 cards from the factory, they're all going to show up with a key pair on them. And it's been generated in an EAL certified kind of a environment inside a smart card or the equivalent secure mechanisms in a mobile device.
Okay, next question. What portion of the current infrastructure can be repurposed and how much requires replacement? And that is in regards to cards, readers, controllers, etc. Rick, maybe you want to take that on?
Yeah, sure. Let's start with the controller side. Most controllers these days can handle the minimum 64-bit card number. To the controllers, it's really just a long card number coming in from the reader at this point. We are working on a second iteration of the spec where the controller does the authentication, but for now, the reader just sends in that long card number. So make sure your panels can accept at least a 64-bit number. 128 is better. If I go for it, 256 is the best. Okay. But yeah, in most cases, the panels can be repurposed. Readers, it's more of a touch and go thing. Some readers we're working with support a firmware update that will now support PKOC in that same reader. Others might need to replace the readers to get them going. And as far as the credentials, they are new credentials. Like Rodney said, they're provisioned from the factory. With a key pair already loaded, or in the mobile app, of course, it's generated when you enroll and create your credential on that same device. Anyone else want to chime in there on the panel?
Well, the other thing is that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Rodney.
If you're using OSDP capable devices, then modern systems should be able to use the standard mechanisms in that to do firmware updates to readers or change credential format. So if you've got a modern enough device, the intention is that they will be able at some point do a firmware update to the readers to get it to the point it could do PKOC or whatever new credential. And then you would also use the same kind of a mechanism to configure the readers to use the proper format. So if you got modern enough readers, you'd be able to do that. Certainly, if you got extremely 20-year-old weakened readers, you're not going to be able to do this. But you've got challenges with that sort of technology if you do any kind of a migration process.
Yeah. Right. So okay. Rick and Rodney have, I think, answered this really well, right? I mean, for the most part, PKOC as a support in the packs and from the panel perspective is a card format, which can be anywhere from 64 bits up to 256. And, there are like pack systems based on Mercury. Mercury would limit at 200 bits, but you could use the full 200 bits on if the pack software supports the format of that size. And most packs today that support anything around PIV or government will at least be able to support the 200, if not the 256. Right. But for legacy purposes, again, can go down to 64. So as Rick was indicating and Rodney, right, depending on the age of the reader and the capabilities, the reality is you need a reader that can be updated and is PKOC compliant, right? So there's no getting around that. But you can approach moving to PKOC in a couple different ways. You could start to issue multi-technology credentials so that you start off with using, whatever the current deployed credential, whether that's Prox or MyFair, DedsFire, right, whatever. So, and then, as you start to introduce new readers, that same credential is already enrolled with their public key open credential. And so now it doesn't matter whether I hit the new reader or the old reader, my credential is working, right? And then I can phase on time updating the reader. So it's not a full-on rip and replace all in one shot, right? And so that, certainly would be one approach. And a second is to use a multi-technology reader that, is able to read the credentials, and that way you can badge at a pace that makes sense, again, for budget and time without a full-on rip and replace. There are definitely some licensing and deployment restrictions depending on what the existing credential that is deployed that must be adhered to. But certainly, reaching out to members of PSIA or some of the various vendors can help make sure that you approach that the right way if that's the path that you're going.
Thank you. Next question, if building A has PKOC with Castle and building B has PKOC with Secure, and a user has credentials for both, how can the reader in building A select a credential and not the B credential?
Well, okay. First of all, the whole point would be to have the same credential being used in both systems, right? You don't really need a separate PKOC A and PKOC B. The whole, if you're planning from the start, just use that same credential and enroll that credential into the various systems, right? So hopefully that won't be an issue. But if you did have two PKOCs in the same device, Rodney, I mean, would that even work? I guess.
I think actually Rick,
or Jason.
Rick really addressed it, right? This is no different than if I'm using Prox cards or, MyFair cards and I have, one card from one vendor A or building A and one from building B. If the reader is set up to read that format, it's going to recognize both cards. But the card from building B or company B is not going to be enrolled in company A, so it'll be a reject for an unknown card, right? And so that would be the same experience in the environment that Rick just described about PKOC. If you had multiple PKOCs, again, and Rick very well said, there's not a need to do that because I could take Castle's PKOC and enroll it in JCI and it'll work just fine. That's the whole interoperability story, right? Any PKOC credential with any PKOC compliant reader. So hopefully it eliminates the need, but if they chose to do that, the PKOC credential, if you wanted to use it in Johnson Controls, would be enrolled as a second credential, and then both could work. But it comes down, the answer specifically to the enrollment.
The other thing is,
I'll just add something. Sorry.
All right.
The idea with the whole being the credential being open and you putting your own app around it, you can look at it as a different way. You can potentially, in a smart way, pick the credential you need. So you could say, in conjunction with a GPS location or a Bluetooth IP, you can pick this card. In conjunction with these things, pick this. So it gives you more leverage to build the journey that you want. So it can be done. You can have one card, you can have multiple cards, or you can be more smart about picking the right card. But all avenues are supported essentially.
The other thing is that a lot of mobile apps these days have the concept of selecting which credential they use. If the mobile application itself could have that concept, people do this today.
That's a great point.
And so, like the use case I have is that for compliance reasons, I have these two different sites. They're actually two different customers, and so they actually don't want me to use the shared credential. So I would, and in the old days, I'd have to have two badges. But if I had a mobile device, I could have a mobile device that had the app was smart enough I could select which one to use at which site.
Okay, great. What license requirement is required from Secure to enable this feature? And I'm assuming they're talking about the enrollment feature. I mean, is the prerequisite also, do we have any manuals so that I can test the same and prepare the POC for our customers to start adopting it?
That's probably a question for me, I'm guessing here. That's one of our apps engineers that's on the webinar here. Hi, Sarvan. Yeah, from the Secure point of view, it's just a standard connection license to Marwin's platform. Nothing special about that. As far as manuals, I do have some documentation on how to set the card formats. I'm assuming Marwin is going to have nice elaborate manuals at some point to go over the installation of his platform, right?
Yes. We actually set up the PKOC now automatically. So on installation of our product, we set up instead of you having to set them up yourself, we'll check if they exist and we'll set them up if they don't. So we are trying to create a one-click solution where you just install it and forget about it and it just works in the background. But yeah, license from Secure is the only thing you need and some licenses from us.
Looks like we have an early adopter waiting to test. That's great.
Okay. Can PKOC coexist with other standards such as MyFair, Desfire, Legic on the same card?
Yes.
Yeah, so the answer is yes. Certainly, in fact, do I have it laying here? Of course, right when I want it.
So, for example, Universal Smart Card is a demo card they've shared with us, which has Leaf and Desfire and I believe Prox.
Yeah, this guy right here.
and PKOC, and the technology is capable of doing this. These are JCOP cards. They have applets on them, so you can have multiple applets loaded, and you can certainly have DesFire and PKOC side by side. I'm assuming Legic, you would be talking about a Legic environment where there's either a DesFire format that uses Legic keys, in which case it's the same thing. I don't know about Legic Neon. That's an applet. I assume you could have that coexist with other things. That's a new product I haven't studied.
Are there any special steps needed for PKOC to work with Apple Wallet, which apparently is famously restrictive?
We don't do wallets.
Yeah, so today PKOC is not in the wallet, right? For those of you that are following the open standards, this past February, we saw the launch of Alero. Alero is wallet and native wallet out of the gun, but it creates the ability to support the public key infrastructure and what that is. So that certainly is the same foundation that public key open credential is based on. So, with Apple's focus on CSA and Alero and Google as well, focusing on that, we've sort of purposely delayed, those conversations, letting, Alero knowing that was going to pave the way for this capability. So that's certainly a future discussion for PKOC. But as Rodney said, today it is not wallet, right? It is app and it is card.
How is the revocation of a PKOC credential managed, and how is this information shared with the controllers?
Yeah, so this is another key element of what is public key open credential versus what it's not. So PKOC was, when it was the inception, the idea, the creation of what the standard is today was to create a asymmetric credential and, and solve the cloning issues and the more secure delivery of the credential. But it is, as Rodney was sharing earlier, not based on a root certificate or certificate authority like you would be familiar with PIV, where it has the revocation engine. So revocation or the management of those enrollments is the same thing as what cards would be today. That is the responsibility of the PACS, that enrolls it, could unenroll it, but there isn't a higher authority revocation engine that sits over PKOC today. I don't know if there's anybody else wants to chime in.
Yeah, I just want to chime in quickly. The product that we have built, the Enrollment SDK, there is a feature that is on the roadmap to allow you to see who currently has your public key, and you can remove that from the building. So if you're using our SDK, you'll be able to see where you've signed up to, but that is for the user removing themselves. Again, like Jason said, there isn't a higher power. It's more the user owns that identity and they can do with it as they wish. But that's all I wanted to add to that.
Yeah, we just have time for a couple more questions. One of them is, on a previous PKOC demo, readers from different manufacturers were outputting different bit lengths. This would require enrolling multiple badge numbers in the system. Is there a plan to standardize the output length so that it's consistent across all reader manufacturers?
So go ahead, Rodney.
So we've sort of iterated on that the specification process is going to advocate 3 specific formats: 64, 128, and 256-bit. And the intention is that readers in a given deployment will be set up for one of these formats. And the idea is that you'd pick a format that works on all the readers that you're using. So 64 is very common. It's not so common for readers to be able to output 256 or for PACS vendors to read it. So it's 64 tends to be the dominant one. But the idea is you would configure the devices all the same format. You wouldn't have to have the intention, I don't think, is that you would have one PKOC card which is in a system in 3 different formats. I mean, I do that in my lab, but that's because I'm doing testing. So in a real deployment, I think you'd stick with one format. Rick, you have any other thing to say about that?
Yeah, fully agree. Yeah, just try to get them all, planned for the same format. And yeah, 64 is your default. You can't go wrong with it. But most of our customers are pressing us to go higher just because they want that extra, security. And we have had one customer now that's deploying that, is, set up for 256. They're going for it. But yeah, still one credential because they're planning all the readers to be that same output.
Yeah, and I think the only thing that I would add to this great discussion is that from an alliance perspective, right, and for all the reasons that Rodney and Rick just shared, the least common denominator avoids the multi-format setup and collisions, right? Again, from a testing perspective, we're doing that all the time to ensure that it works. In the real world, you probably would try to avoid that. You'd use the 64-bit. However, we will continue to advise and encourage people to use the strongest option available, right? So over time, as products evolve and our legacy stuff is phased out and newer equipment comes, the idea is that all embraces a 256-bit and stays at the strongest point.
Great. I think we're going to wrap up. I wanted to share with everybody that, if you'd like to get involved in some of the technical activities, to be a contributor, or to use the technology, please reach out, contact us. We're more than willing to share some of this perspective with you. Jason, any last comments for you?
Yeah, I know we weren't able to get through all of the Q&A today, but we will collect those and and as a follow-up to the attendees here today, try to make sure we're getting answers to all the questions we weren't able to address in today's session. And again, my personal thanks on behalf of all of the panel here. Really appreciate the panel's time to put together the latest information, keep you apprised of what's going on with PKOC and PSIA, and as well for all of you that chose to take time out of your busy schedules to hear about this, right? And ask the great questions that have been presented here today. So hope you have a fantastic rest of the week and look forward to peacocking with you down the road.
Great.
All right, take care, everybody.
Okay. Okay, bye.